Changde, China, located in Hunan province, is home to millions of residents. But on the morning of June 16, 2025, many of them were woken up by something far from ordinary. At a fireworks facility in Linli County, a small fire reportedly broke out during a routine loading process. At first, it may not have seemed like anything unusual, but in a setting like this, even a minor incident can quickly escalate. The fire spread rapidly, eventually reaching a storage area containing high-powered fireworks. What followed was a massive explosion, powerful enough to be felt across nearby villages. Windows shattered, doors were blown open, and debris was scattered over a wide area. Tragically, at least 9 people lost their lives, while dozens more were injured and taken to nearby hospitals. While many of the injuries were not life-threatening, the scale of the explosion left a lasting impact on the surrounding community. Further investigation revealed that the facility had previously been cited for safety violations and issues related to land use. Reports suggest that improper handling and safety lapses may have contributed to the incident. In environments like this, strict regulations exist for a reason, and when they're ignored, the consequences can be catastrophic. But while this incident shows what can happen when safety is ignored on a large scale, the next one is much more personal and just as devastating. On January 8, 2025, what started as a fun night between friends in Russia quickly turned into something much more serious. A group of young people were driving through a snowy area, pulling a snow tube, known as a vatrushka, behind their car. One of them, Daria, was riding on the tube as the car picked up speed. At first, it likely felt like harmless fun, the kind of thing people do without thinking too much about the risks. But as the speed increased, the tube began to swing more aggressively from side to side. Within seconds, it veered too far and slammed directly into a road sign, with Daria still on it. The impact caused severe head injuries. Instead of calling emergency services immediately, the driver and her boyfriend made a critical decision to take her to a hospital themselves. Unfortunately, she didn't survive. In an attempt to avoid responsibility, they told medical staff that she had been injured in a different way, claiming it was a sledding accident. They even returned to the scene later to cover the blood with snow, trying to hide what had happened. But what they didn't realize was that nearby surveillance cameras had already recorded everything. Once police reviewed the footage, the truth became clear, and both individuals were arrested. In court, the driver eventually admitted guilt, bringing the case to a close, but not without raising serious questions about the decisions made in those first critical moments. Now, sometimes it's not speed or thrill, but heavy machinery that creates the same kind of risk. So the next time a workplace safety briefing feels repetitive or unnecessary, this is the kind of situation worth remembering. This incident took place on August 3, 2020 in Samut Prakan, Thailand, an industrial area just outside Bangkok. A worker was operating an overhead crane, moving several multi-ton steel rolls across the warehouse floor. At first, everything appears to be under control. The crane system is functioning properly, and there's no visible issue with the equipment itself. But the danger doesn't come from above. While attempting to position one of the steel rolls, it suddenly tips over. The weight is immense, and within seconds, it crushes the worker's legs, pinning him to the ground. To make matters worse, his head is positioned dangerously close to additional suspended steel, adding even more pressure to an already critical situation. He struggles and calls out for help, clearly in distress. Thankfully, nearby workers hear him and react quickly. They move the overhead load out of the way and then work together to lift the fallen roll, freeing him after what must have felt like an incredibly long and painful moment. He reportedly suffered broken legs but survived, thanks largely to the quick response of his co-workers. What stands out in this situation isn't just the accident itself, but how quickly it happened, and how important immediate action was in preventing something even worse. Now imagine that same lack of control, but on a much larger scale. On September 8, 2025, a routine commute turned into a devastating accident in Mexico when a double-decker bus carrying dozens of passengers attempted to cross a railway line on its way toward Mexico City. The crossing reportedly had no proper barriers or warning systems, something that would soon prove critical. As the bus moved onto the tracks, it became stuck, unable to move forward or reverse due to traffic building behind it. At the same time, a train was already approaching at high speed. Inside the bus, the realization set in quickly, but there was nothing anyone could do to stop what was coming. Seconds later, the train collided with the vehicle, tearing it apart on impact. The force split the bus into sections, scattering debris across the area and causing immediate casualties. Several passengers were killed on the spot, while many others were seriously injured. The driver managed to escape before the collision, but fled the scene. He was later arrested and charged as investigators worked to understand how the situation had been allowed to escalate to that point. It's the kind of accident that highlights how critical infrastructure and timing can be, because once the bus became stuck, the outcome was almost impossible to avoid. And that takes us from a situation where no one had a chance to react in time, to one where a single decision made all the difference. Now I'm sure everyone has bad days at work, but for this forklift operator, things escalated in a way that's hard to forget. The incident took place on April 7th, 2017, during what appeared to be a completely normal evening shift inside a warehouse. A few workers were gathered at the end of a long aisle, talking and going about their routine, while a forklift approached from the opposite side. At first, nothing about the situation seems unusual. The driver moves forward at a controlled pace, likely trying to navigate around the group and continue down the aisle. Space is limited, though, and instead of stopping to clear the path or asking the workers to move, happens incredibly fast. The structure collapses almost instantly, bringing down everything stored on it. Boxes, materials, and pallets crash into each other, creating a chain reaction that spreads across the aisle. The force of the collapse pushes the forklift sideways, leaving the driver trapped in the middle of the chaos. Turned into a full-scale collapse before anyone had time to react. What makes this incident stand out isn't just the damage, but how preventable it likely was. A simple pause, a quick signal to clear the aisle, or just giving the situation a bit more space could have avoided everything that followed. There's no confirmed information on what to completely out of control. Now, at least that incident was caused by a mistake. But in this next clip, what you're about to see isn't accidental at all. In August 2021, a series of leaked surveillance videos from Evin Prison in Tehran, Iran, began circulating online, quickly drawing global attention. The facility had long been associated with political prisoners and allegations of abuse, but what the footage revealed made those claims much harder to ignore. The videos initially showed guards inside a control room monitoring surveillance screens, which seemed routine at first. But without warning, the system was disrupted. Screens began to flicker, feeds cut out, and a message appeared indicating a cyber attack. The breach was carried out by a hacker group calling itself Adalat-e-Ali, or Justice of Ali, which then released internal footage to the media. What followed was a series of clips that painted a disturbing picture of conditions inside the prison. Overcrowded cells, detainees packed into tight spaces, and a lack of basic care were visible throughout the footage. Some clips went further, showing physical abuse, with guards striking prisoners or dragging them across the floor. Human rights organizations later reviewed the material and stated that it provided credible evidence of mistreatment and neglect. Officials acknowledged the breach but condemned the leak itself, while also promising to investigate the incident shown. For many observers, the footage didn't just raise questions. It confirmed concerns that had been reported for years, but rarely seen so clearly. But while that situation unfolded over years, in this next clip, everything happened in just seconds. On October 20th, 2024, a 23-year-old man named Uday checked into the Hotel WV Pride in Hyderabad, India, planning nothing more than a fun night celebrating a friend's birthday. At first, everything seemed completely normal. Like many guests, he moved through the hotel casually, unaware that within minutes, something would go terribly wrong. CCTV footage later showed him on the third floor, where a stray dog had wandered into the corridor. Instead of ignoring it, Uday began playing with the dog, chasing it down the hallway in a moment that probably didn't feel dangerous at all, although it's up for debate if he was really playing with the dog or had other intentions. But either way, the moment quickly turned into something fatal. As the dog suddenly changed direction, Uday followed at speed, unable to react in time when it made a sharp turn. That split-second loss of control led him straight toward an open section of the corridor. One of the windows in the third-floor lobby had been left open, with no protective grille or barrier in place. Moving too fast to stop, Uday collided with the opening and fell over the edge. The impact was immediate and severe. His friends rushed downstairs in panic and quickly transported him to a nearby hospital, but the injuries were too critical. He was pronounced dead on the way. What makes this case so difficult is how ordinary it began. A moment of play, a small lapse in awareness, and a missing safety barrier were all it took to turn a celebration into a tragedy. It was a tragic accident involving one person. But the next clip, however, shows how dangerous entire environments can be. Shunda District, located in Foshan, Guangdong Province, China, is a major industrial area with millions of residents. On October 21st, 2024, one warehouse there became the site of a dangerous chain reaction. Workers initially noticed smoke inside the building, something that immediately raised concern. Tracing the source, they discovered it was coming from pallets of lithium-ion batteries. At that point, panic set in. Lithium-ion batteries are known for their potential to enter thermal runaway, a reaction where heat causes further heat generation, leading to fires or explosions.
看到冒烟就赶快过来了。
就你们都会在旁边备着水。
The fire spreads rapidly, and at first glance, it even looks like attempts to extinguish it might be making things worse. However, as the footage shows, there's a brief gap in time, and the worker in the white shirt manages to escape before the situation escalates further. Despite the intensity of the fire, no injuries were reported. The warehouse owner later stated that the business had only recently started operating, and it remains unclear whether the batteries were already unstable or became compromised during storage. Incidents like this highlight how volatile certain materials can be, especially when stored improperly or without adequate safety precautions. And with that being said, we head from chemical reactions to something much more physical. In Kerala, India, where domesticated elephants are often part of daily and ceremonial life, an experienced handler named Evin Prison was carrying out what should have been a routine task, bathing the elephant under his care. At one point, he instructed the animal to lie down so he could clean its back. When the elephant hesitated, he used a stick to encourage it to follow the command, something that likely wasn't unusual in that setting. But in that moment, the situation shifted in a way he couldn't control. As he moved, he slipped on the wet ground and fell directly into the space where the elephant was about to lie down. The animal, unaware of his position, followed through with the command and lowered its full weight onto him. The force was overwhelming. An adult elephant can weigh several thousand kilograms, and there was no chance of survival once that weight came down. People nearby rushed to help, but by the time they reached him, it was already too late. Incidents like this are a reminder that even in environments where animals are trained and familiar, the sheer scale of their strength means that a single mistake can have irreversible consequences. And that takes us to another workplace environment, where things go wrong just as quickly. In Dos Hermanas, Spain, just south of Seville, an industrial facility operated by Alu Europa specializes in aluminum extrusion, a process that involves forcing heated metal through a shaped mold. On June 2nd, 2022, what started as a routine workday quickly turned into a major emergency. Workers were monitoring the machinery when a component failure occurred. A gasket suddenly ruptured, releasing pressurized hydraulic fluid into the air. That fluid, being flammable, ignited almost instantly. The result was immediate chaos. Flames spread rapidly across the equipment, and workers scrambled to evacuate the area. At one point, a worker can be seen briefly returning, possibly to retrieve something, before quickly retreating as conditions worsen. Moments later, parts of the structure begin to collapse. Fortunately, everyone inside the facility managed to evacuate in time. Fire crews later reported that the blaze consumed a large portion of the building before it was brought under control. Due to the extent of the damage, investigators were unable to determine the exact cause of the initial failure. But the incident remains a clear example of how quickly industrial environments can become dangerous. Now, while we just saw how equipment can fail, in this next video, the cause isn't so obvious at all. On December 11th, 2025, an Australian man walked into a Turkish restaurant in Phuket, Thailand. And, at first, nothing about the situation seemed unusual. He sat down alone at a table, but after a few moments, people around him began to notice that something felt off. He appeared disoriented, nodding repeatedly and looking unfocused, as if he wasn't fully aware of his surroundings. Concerned, a waiter approached him to check if he was okay, but that simple interaction seemed to trigger something unexpected. Without warning, the man suddenly became frantic, raising his voice and standing up abruptly before sprinting toward the exit. What makes the moment so disturbing is what happens next. Instead of slowing down or reaching for the handle, he ran straight into the glass door at full speed, shattering it instantly. The impact sent shards of glass everywhere, and one of them caused a severe injury to his leg, cutting into a major artery. He collapsed outside the restaurant within seconds, losing blood rapidly. Emergency services arrived and transported him to a nearby hospital, but despite their efforts, the blood loss was too severe, and he was pronounced dead shortly after. Authorities later identified him as an Australian tourist, but even after reviewing the footage and medical reports, they were unable to determine exactly what caused his sudden behavior. Because of that, the case remains unresolved, leaving behind a situation that is as confusing as it is tragic. And with that, we move from uncertainty to deliberate action. If there were ever an award for the worst employee of the year, this man would be a serious contender. The incident reportedly took place in Huizhou, China, a city in Guangdong province, and what happened was captured entirely on CCTV inside a foam warehouse. The footage begins with two workers arguing over how to properly stack large sheets of foam. At first, it just looks like a normal disagreement, the kind that happens in workplaces all the time. Eventually, the two separate, and one of the men walks away toward the camera. But instead of letting the situation go, it becomes clear that something else is going through his mind. He approaches a stack of foam with one hand casually in his pocket, glancing around as if making sure no one is paying attention. There's something off about the way he moves, and within seconds, that suspicion turns into something much worse. He pulls out a lighter and deliberately sets the foam on fire. What he doesn't seem to realize is that the material is highly flammable and may still be coated with residual butane from the manufacturing process. The reaction is immediate. Flames spread far faster than he expected, quickly engulfing the surrounding stacks. At first, he tries to pat the fire out, but it's completely useless. Within moments, the situation is out of control, and he's forced to back away as the fire spreads across the warehouse. The blaze grows so intense that thick smoke can be seen rising from miles away. According to local authorities, the man was arrested shortly after the incident, and reports suggest that he may have started the fire out of nothing more than curiosity. Whatever the reason, the consequences were severe, turning a brief moment of poor judgment into a large-scale industrial fire. It clearly showed what happens when someone causes damage intentionally. Now, let's look at something that couldn't be controlled. During a local religious festival in India, large metal pots filled with boiling porridge had been set up near a temple as part of a traditional preparation. These kinds of events are usually carefully managed, with people moving around the area in a controlled way, even though the environment itself can be dangerous. At some point, a man named Muthukumar was seen on CCTV slowly walking toward the cooking area. His movements appeared unsteady, and at first, it may have seemed like he was simply tired or disoriented. But within seconds, it became clear that something wasn't right. As he approached one of the massive pots, he appeared to look for something to steady himself on, and without realizing the danger, he leaned against it. The pot was filled with boiling porridge, and almost immediately, he lost his balance and fell into it. People nearby reacted as quickly as they could, rushing to pull him out and even overturning the heavy pot onto the ground to free him. But the damage had already been done. He had suffered severe burns across his body, and despite being taken for medical treatment, his condition was too critical. He passed away later that same day. What makes this even more tragic is that police later confirmed he had not been intoxicated, as some initially assumed. Instead, he had epilepsy, and it's believed he suffered a seizure at that exact moment, which caused him to lose control and fall. It's the kind of situation where timing alone made all the difference. And that takes us to this last clip, one that perfectly shows how dangerous industrial environments can be. The term wet charge might not mean much to most people, but for those working in foundries, it's something they're trained to avoid at all costs. It refers to one of the most dangerous scenarios that can occur when working with high-temperature furnaces. Take a look at this clip from January 2013. Foundry furnaces operate at extremely high temperatures, hot enough to instantly turn water into steam. A wet charge occurs when scrap metal that has been exposed to moisture, whether from rain, snow, or even humidity, is placed into the furnace. Even if the metal appears dry on the surface, water can remain trapped inside tiny cracks and crevices. Once that metal is dropped into molten conditions, the water rapidly expands into steam, increasing in volume by up to 1,600 times. When that happens across a large amount of material, the result can be explosive. Now, with that in mind, take another look. You can see debris and fragments being violently ejected from the furnace, scattering across the facility. It's a powerful reaction, and in many cases, it can lead to serious injuries or even fatalities. Fortunately, in this particular incident, no one was hurt, and the damage appears to have been contained. But it serves as a clear reminder of how even a small oversight in industrial environments can escalate into something extremely dangerous. Now that was all for today, folks. If you enjoyed these horrifying clips, click to see more on the video on screen.